My name is Mark Windsor, and I am 40 years old. I am married to Karen, who is also 40, and we have 17-year-old twins, John and Jasmine. We have been married for almost 20 years, and our anniversary is coming up in 6 months. We were excited about a party we planned to have at a hotel ballroom, where all our friends and family would join us. I'm a self-taught day trader, and I'm doing well with it. The great thing about day trading is that you only need a laptop and an internet connection to do it anywhere. I also love sailing and own a 30-foot boat that my best friend Frank and I take out whenever we can. Karen and Mary, Frank's wife, don't really enjoy the sailing, so they often go shopping or go to the spa while we're out on the water. Karen works at a public relations firm called Randall Associates as a researcher and promoter. She gets up in the morning, gives me a kiss, and heads to work from 9 to 5. I get the kids ready, feed them, and send them off to school, so I am a stay-at-home dad. We share the housework like any other couple and spend time with the same friends. We always take 2 vacations a year, one to a sunny place and another for skiing. Karen's mother, Grace, lives just an hour away, and her sister, Beth, is close enough to help babysit when the kids were young. Life seemed perfect, or so I thought. Things began to change one afternoon when I received a text from Frank, one of my poker friends, with an attachment. "Hi, Mark. Sorry to bother you, but I thought you should know where Karen is and who she's with. This might not mean anything, but please check the attachment. The man is Paul Scott, the CEO of Randall Associates, her boss. If you want, I can follow them after lunch." I opened the attachment and saw a photo of my wife holding hands with Paul Scott, looking like a couple. I had met Paul at a company event. He's tall, around 6'2", and he used to be a famous NFL player. From the start, I didn't like him. He had a way of looking at women that felt wrong, especially how he looked at my wife. When he noticed me looking, he just smirked and walked away. I messaged Frank back and asked him to let me know where they went after lunch. He replied he would check in later. I found it hard to focus for the rest of the day. Trading needs careful attention, so I decided to stop working early and picked up the kids instead. Once they were in the car, the usual talk started right away. "Dad, if you would get us our own cars, you wouldn't have to pick us up every day. All our friends have cars, so why don't we?" "I don't mind you having cars, but you need to earn the money for them. Get a part-time job and save up." "I worked 2 jobs to pay for my college." Yeah, we've heard it all before. You just had to drive around in an old junker." "I'm aware you've worked hard to come from nothing to a better place, so why not help us out by buying us cars?" "First, we're not rich. Your mother and I are comfortable, but you won't truly become wealthy until you earn it yourself. I will give you the chance and support you need, but you have to put in the effort. Do we all understand that?" They didn't respond, and when we got home, they went straight to their rooms, hopefully to do their homework. Karen came home at her usual time of 5:30. I had started dinner when she came over and gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. I sensed something odd and noticed a faint smell that made me curious. "I'm going to take a quick shower. Be right back." "Dinner will be ready in 10 minutes. Please tell the kids to come down." We usually ate dinner together and shared about our day, but the kids were quiet and Karen said little. I tried to start a conversation to see if she would reveal what happened during her lunch break. "How was your day, sweetheart?" "Oh, the usual. Mostly paperwork and a couple of meetings. Nothing special." "I hope you ate a proper lunch. It's important for your energy with how busy you are." I thought I saw a brief look of worry pass across her face, but she hid it quickly. "You don't have to worry. A few of us women went to the deli for lunch. That didn't feel quite right. I hope you're keeping away from that flirty boss of yours. I wouldn't want to have to confront him for bothering you." She looked guilty and glanced at the kids who were watching. What did they know that I didn't? No, I haven't seen him for a couple of days. He hardly even notices me. Why do you ask? I was starting to feel uneasy. "Well, Frank was having lunch with a customer at Lombard's and thought he saw you with another man. I'm sure he was mistaken." Now she looked genuinely worried. "Well, it definitely wasn't me. He must have been wrong. Why are you questioning me like this?" That felt like 3 strikes against her. The kids asked to leave the table to finish their homework, and we agreed. "I'm just concerned for your well-being, that's all." "What do you mean by well-being? Is that a threat?" "No, sweetheart, it's nothing like that. I know you would never betray me. You love me too much for that, right?" She looked panicked. "Of course I would never want to hurt you. You know that, don't you?" That's what I thought because the idea of you having lunch while being close to another man breaks my heart. Frank called me earlier asking to meet at Jill's Grills, one of our regular spots. He sounded serious but wouldn't explain over the phone. We agreed to meet at 8:30. When I got there, I ordered a couple of beers and waited in a booth. Frank walked in and sat down across from me, taking a sip from his drink. He seemed uneasy, avoiding my gaze. "All right, Frank, what is it?" I asked. He sighed, looked at me with a mix of pity and concern, and handed me his phone. The screen was ready to play a video. As I pressed play, my world crumbled. There on the screen was my wife, after 20 years of marriage, being unfaithful with Paul. I could hardly believe it. I felt sick to my stomach, bile rising in my throat, and I rushed to the bathroom to throw up. When I returned to the table, Frank had tears in his eyes, clearly hurting for me. He had recorded the evidence after following them to a motel. He gave them some time before he managed to get a glimpse through a window and recorded the scene, just enough to confirm what I had feared. I looked at the video again, but the heartbreak was quickly replaced by a burning anger, mostly directed at my wife. After spending the afternoon with Peter, I headed home, feeling both tired and sore. I hoped Mark wouldn't want to talk much tonight. When I walked in, I found him making dinner, and a fleeting thought crossed my mind. Would Peter ever do something like this? Probably not. He's too much of a tough guy. But Mark is such a kind soul. I kissed Mark on the cheek, but he gave me a strange look in return. I headed upstairs to shower, told the kids dinner was ready, and then joined everyone at the table. The kids were unusually quiet, which made me wonder if they had argued with Mark again. During dinner, Mark asked me how my day went, and specifically about my lunch plans. His tone was different, and I quickly realized I needed to come up with a believable story. Then, out of nowhere, he mentioned that Frank had seen someone who looked like me having lunch with a man at Lombard's. My heart sank. I denied everything, asking him what he was suggesting, but Mark's words carried a hint of threat. My mind raced and my stomach churned. I felt like I might faint. I cleared the table, but my hands were trembling, and I could barely make eye contact with him. Mark left for his office, and I felt a wave of panic. Frank. Why did he have to get involved? He should worry about his own business. If only he knew what his wife Mary was up to with Clive from HR. As Karen cleared the table, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She wouldn't look at me. Her hands were shaking. It didn't take long to piece things together after Frank's warning. I headed to my office, but my mind was already running through everything I had seen on Frank's phone. Something was broken between us, and I wasn't sure how or if it could ever be fixed. When I watched the video, I saw my wife in a situation that shattered my heart. I turned to Frank, who looked regretful. "Mark, I'm really sorry. I wish I hadn't seen them at the restaurant. Then I wouldn't have to tell you all this. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet, but they'll pay for this." "Mark, don't do anything reckless. They're not worth ruining your life over. Don't worry. I'll handle it in a way that keeps me out of trouble. And Frank, please don't tell anyone about this, not even Mary." We said our goodbyes, and I headed home. When I got there, Karen had already gone to bed, which was a relief because I wasn't ready to face her. Too angry to share the bed, I made up the couch in my office and spent a restless night, waking up with a pounding headache. But at least now I had the beginnings of a plan. In the morning, I made sure the kids had breakfast and dropped them off at school. Afterward, I sat down to focus on the first part of my plan, protecting my financial interests. I logged into our joint bank accounts to review the situation. There was about $60,000 in the account, but I noticed that while I was regularly depositing money, Karen had stopped contributing 3 months ago. I quietly transferred $50,000 into my personal account. I knew she wouldn't notice since she left all the finances to me. I didn't close the credit accounts, not wanting to raise any suspicion just yet. The stocks and bonds were in a safe deposit box at the bank, and I decided I'd handle those later. Then I checked her personal account. I knew her passwords, and discovered that half of her salary was going into an account I wasn't aware of. I printed the details for further investigation later. I also lowered her credit card limit to $1,000. Unless she made a big purchase, she wouldn't notice. That was all I could do for now without making her suspicious. The next step in my plan was to gather solid proof of her infidelity. I called Tony, my attorney, and asked him to recommend the toughest divorce lawyer in the state. After expressing his condolences about my marriage, he gave me the contact information for Ann York, a lawyer known for being ruthless in court. I thanked him and made an appointment with Miss York for the next day. Still thinking about my finances, I went back into my accounts and moved everything except $10,000 into a separate one, ensuring I had control over the situation before things escalated. I didn't need to worry about hiding my money. I had about $25 million, which was spread across 3 accounts, one in Switzerland, one in the Cayman Islands, and one in Belize. I arrived at the lawyer's office right on time and was led into her room. She stood up and took my hand. "Good morning, Mr. Windsor. I hear you were sent to me by Tony Wood. I usually don't work with men, but since Tony recommended you, I'll listen. Just so you know, if you are the one at fault, we will stop right there." "Good morning, Miss York. From your tone, it seems you might not like men much, so maybe I came to the wrong lawyer." "Have a good day," I replied, turning to leave. "Wait a moment. I think we got off on the wrong foot. Let's start over. Please, have a seat and call me Ann. And you can call me Mark." As I sat across from Ann, I realized she was quite an impressive woman. Even though she looked to be around 50, she still had a lovely appearance. I shared that I had never cheated and wouldn't think of it, but my wife had different views on our vows. I showed her proof that my wife, Karen, had been unfaithful. Ann explained that because we lived in a no-fault state, Karen's actions wouldn't change the settlement terms. She detailed that Karen would get half of our savings, most of my retirement funds, and part of my business, which I might have to sell. Additionally, I would need to pay support for my wife and children, and she would remain in our home as the main caretaker. I explained that I was a self-employed day trader, meaning I didn't have retirement funds to divide, and my business only required a laptop and a place to work. I then asked if I could take action against Karen's employer for their lack of oversight since she was involved with someone during work hours, and it seemed that management knew about it. Ann seemed enthusiastic about this, and even suggested we could make a claim against the other person for causing trouble in our marriage. She said it might not go very far, but would certainly cause some embarrassment. She could prepare the documents within 3 days. I had another idea. I wanted Karen served with the papers on our wedding anniversary, which was a little less than 6 months away, and I wanted the other person served 2 weeks earlier, explaining my reasons. After we outlined the plan, I asked if she knew any good private investigators. She made a quick call and set up an appointment for me the next day with Georg Arnold. I thanked her for her help and left a substantial retainer fee. It was getting late and it was time to pick up the kids, so I drove to their school and waited. When they came out, they got into my car without saying anything, but I thought I noticed them smiling at me in the mirror. We got out of the car and went inside. The kids went straight to their rooms to do their homework without saying anything. They really needed to start acting more mature. Karen came home at her usual time while I was making dinner. "I'm just going to take a quick shower. I won't be long," she said. She seemed unusually happy, and I wondered if something had happened at work. I waited at the bottom of the stairs until I heard the shower running. Then, I hurried upstairs to our bedroom. I checked the laundry basket and found some underwear that I didn't recognize. I looked closer and noticed something that made me suspicious. I took them downstairs, put them in a zip bag, and stored it in my office safe, changing the lock combination for good measure. When she came back down with the kids, I had dinner ready. The meal was the same as last night, and the kids barely acknowledged me while Karen seemed distracted. After dinner, the kids went back to their rooms and Karen started cleaning up. I thought it might be nice to plan something special. "Hey, we haven't spent much time together lately. How about lunch tomorrow, just the 2 of us? I'll take you somewhere nice." "Sorry, but I have a meeting at lunchtime tomorrow, maybe Thursday?" she replied. "Actually, I spoke to your secretary. She said you're free tomorrow, so I'll pick you up at 1 p.m. in your parking lot." I smiled sweetly at her, and I could tell she was annoyed. I hoped I hadn't gotten her secretary in trouble. I really did talk to her right after I knew Karen had left work. This way, Karen couldn't say no, so we agreed to meet in the parking lot. The next day, I arrived at the private investigator's office, where I was welcomed by his secretary, who was quite attractive. I was momentarily lost for words. "If you're done staring, maybe I can assist you," she said playfully. "Oh, I'm so sorry." "I didn't mean to stare. I'm here to see George Arnold. My name is Mark Windsor." Right this way, please. She led me into a nice office and introduced me to George, who was tall and seemed to be in his mid-40s. We shook hands and he gestured for me to sit. Anne has briefed me about your situation. What would you like me to do? And let's keep everything legal, he said. I don't want anything against the law. I just want my wife and her companion followed. I'd like reports and any photos or videos you can take. Money is not a problem. Do you have their pictures with you? He asked. I showed him the evidence I had saved on my phone. He transferred the files to his computer and suggested placing surveillance in our home. I agreed to have our phones monitored, but mentioned I didn't think she would bring him to where I worked from home. He also asked if I paid for her cell phone, and when I said yes, he mentioned he could clone her phone if I met one of his team at night with it. I gave him a spare house key so he could set up surveillance equipment while I was out. He explained that the equipment would send everything to a laptop in my loft, and from there to the cloud. I told him my wife and her lover would likely meet for lunch the next day. He assured me he would get more evidence, so I paid him a retainer and left. Later, I picked Karen up as planned and drove out of the parking lot. Where are we going for lunch? She asked. It's a surprise, I said. A friend recommended it. It's not far. As we pulled into the parking lot of Lombard's, I saw the look of panic flash across Karen's face, and I had to suppress a smile. I had reserved a table ahead of time, and when we were seated, it was at the same table she and her lover had been photographed sitting at. Karen looked visibly uneasy now. The waitress came over to hand us the menus. Oh, hello again, she said, smiling at Karen. Weren't you here last week? I raised an eyebrow at my wife, waiting for her response. Oh, yes, Karen said quickly, forcing a smile. I was here with a couple of the girls from my office. This is my husband, Mark. The waitress gave her a knowing look before leaving us alone. We ordered lunch, but Karen kept glancing around nervously, as if she was expecting something to go wrong. When I mentioned I was going to the bathroom, she nearly jumped out of her seat. I chuckled to myself as I walked away. On my way back from the bathroom, the waitress was waiting for me. Mr. Windsor, right? I checked your booking. Please call me Mark, I replied. What can I do for you? I know it's not my place, and you can tell me to mind my own business if you want, but you seem like a decent guy. I thought you should know that your wife comes here often with another man. Why are you telling me this? I asked. My ex cheated on me, and I remember how awful it was. None of my friends told me, and I was the last to find out. Here's my number if you need me to testify. Good luck, Mark. She handed me her number and walked away. When I returned to the table, I noticed Karen quickly putting her phone away. I guessed she was warning her lover not to show up. We finished lunch and I drove her back to work. She was unusually quiet, and I didn't say much either, which seemed to unsettle her even more. That night, Karen tried to initiate intimacy, but I told her I had a headache. She seemed a bit disappointed but didn't say anything. The next day she had a real meeting, so I knew she hadn't met with her lover. When she tried to initiate again, I claimed to have a stomachache. I realized I couldn't keep making excuses without raising suspicion, but the weekend was coming and I knew she wouldn't have a lunchtime rendezvous. She offered to make dinner that night as a special treat. She spent most of the afternoon preparing one of my favorite meals. After dinner, we sat together on the couch, something we hadn't done in months, watching TV. The kids were staying over at friends' houses, so we had the place to ourselves. After a while, I asked her if something was bothering her. I could see the worry on her face as she responded, No. Why do you ask? Well, you've seemed a bit distant lately. Distant? What do you mean? When was the last time we were close? You know, really close? She hesitated before answering. Well, you had a headache, then a stomachache. No, I mean before that. I could see her trying to remember. Maybe last week? Or the week before? Do you remember going to the Pattersons' barbecue 2 months ago? Yeah, so what? Well, you had a bit too much to drink, and when we got home, things got a little heated. She smiled faintly. I remember. Well, that was the last time. Her smile faded. No, it can't have been. But it was. That's why I've noticed something's been different. I thought I saw a hint of regret in her eyes. I decided to press further. Is there anything you want to tell me? I hoped that if she came clean, we could maybe work through this. 20 years of marriage is a long time to just throw away. Tell you what? She asked, her tone defensive. Okay, I'll just ask directly. Are you seeing someone else? I saw panic flash across her face as she quickly stood up. How could you ask me that? You know I love only you. Tears filled her eyes as she stormed out of the room. I sat on the couch watching TV for another hour, trying to process everything. Later, I went to bed. Karen was already asleep. The next morning, I woke up to her being unusually affectionate, something she hadn't done in years. But just as things were about to escalate, a thought entered my mind, a memory of the betrayal. I pulled away, unable to continue, and turned over, feeling conflicted. I didn't say anything, but it was clear that things between us had changed. The emotional distance was still there, and despite her efforts, the trust between us had been broken. After each time I pushed in, I went a little further. She gripped the pillow and began to cry, realizing I wasn't going to stop. But I kept going, not caring about her reaction. After a while, I was fully in, and I picked up the pace. I could feel my frustration building, but then she surprised me by reacting in a way that made me pause. I thought this was supposed to be a punishment. When it was over, she collapsed, seemingly overwhelmed. I took a shower and returned to find her awake, looking at me with a strange expression. "You're awful. That wasn't right," she said. But then, her tone changed. "But I've never felt like that before. Promise you'll do it again tonight." "Maybe if you're good," I replied. She smiled and said in a playful tone, "I promise to be good." Even though there was a part of me that felt conflicted, I knew I couldn't let things go. She had her chance to come clean, and she didn't. So, over the next few days, we spent time together, but I kept reminding myself of her betrayal. Things returned to normal for a while. I later found out that her lover had been away at a conference, which explained why Karen had been so eager for attention at home. She hadn't turned to me out of love, just convenience. I had already asked George, the private investigator, not to give me weekly updates unless something major happened. I had enough evidence for a divorce, so there wasn't much left to report. That's why I was surprised when he called me out of the blue. "Hey, George, what's going on?" I asked. "Mark, something important has come up. You need to come to my office as soon as possible," he replied. I arrived just after lunch. "Okay, George, what's so urgent?" I asked. He looked serious. "Things have taken a bad turn, and you're not going to like this." He plugged in a thumb drive and played a video. On the screen, I saw Karen and her lover in a different restaurant. They seemed to be waiting for someone. A few minutes later, 2 people walked in, and my heart sank. It was my kids. My son shook hands with her lover, and my daughter got a kiss on the cheek. They sat down together, ordered lunch, and were chatting comfortably, as if they had met before. Just when I thought it couldn't get worse, 2 more people approached the table. I felt sick when I realized it was Mary, my best friend's wife, with a younger man. They joined the group, and all 6 of them talked like they were old friends. George paused the video. "I'm sorry, Mark, but you should know, the guy with Mary is Clive White, her boss and the head of HR. I'm still not sure how your kids fit into all of this, but it doesn't look good. Watch the rest of this clip." George started the video again and skipped ahead to the end of lunch. While Mary and White finished eating, Karen and SF were playfully acting close together under the table. My kids just laughed, clearly thinking it was amusing. Then George took out the USB drive and replaced it with another one, which showed a vacant hotel room. Suddenly, the door opened, and in came my wife and SF, followed by Mary and Grimes. Without any hesitation, they took off their clothes and quickly got onto the bed together. It didn't take long before SF was getting intimate with my wife, while Mary and Grimes were also engaged. After about 5 minutes, SF was with my wife in a deeper way. Mary and Grimes did the same, both women reaching a high point almost at the same time, and to my shock, they switched partners for another round. George paused the video. "Did you notice they didn't use protection this time?" "Oh no, I didn't see that. Now I'll have to get tested for health issues." "This continues for the next hour and a half. Do you really want to watch it all?" "No, I've seen enough. What a bunch of strange people. At least the kids weren't included. That would have broken me." "What's your plan now?" "Keep watching, but add Mary and White to the list." I had a tough job ahead, and I was not looking forward to it. I called Frank and asked him to meet me at Gill's Grills at 8. I was cooking dinner when Karen came in. "Hi, babe. Just taking a quick shower. I won't be long. Dinner smells great." I didn't reply, and she paused at the top of the stairs. Honey, is everything okay? I don't know, is it? What do you mean by that? Her voice trembled slightly. Well, you didn't used to go straight for a shower, so what changed? I just feel a bit dirty, that's all. What makes you feel this way 3 times a week? There was a long pause before she spoke. It's the air conditioner at work. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. Oh, okay. I thought it might be the exercising, like running downstairs or something. Don't take too long. Dinner's ready. I couldn't see her face, but I could sense her worry. Dinner was silent again. She cleared the table and started doing the dishes. Normally I'd help, but tonight I just grabbed my coat and left. I'm going to meet Frank at Gill's Grills. Don't wait up. By the way, how's your friend Mary? Crash. Oh no, another broken plate. When I arrived at Jill's, Frank was already there waiting for me. I slid into the seat across from him and looked at the friend I was about to upset. I remembered how he had done the same to me just weeks ago. Now I knew how he had felt, and all I felt was sympathy for him. Jill brought 2 beers over, but didn't joke like she usually did. She seemed to sense something was wrong. What's the matter, Mark? She asked. I know you realize how difficult this is, but I have to do this for your benefit. I played a recording for him. By the end, he was in tears, and people started to notice. I stopped the recording just as Jill approached us. I think you both need some privacy. Why not use the back room? I'll bring your drinks there. I helped Frank to the back room, and Jill came with our drinks. Okay, what's going on? First you, Mark, a couple of weeks ago, and now Frank looks like he's been through a lot, she said. I looked at Frank and he nodded, so I shared the recording with her. I mentioned I had seen something similar the last time we were here, Dot. At first, Jill looked pale, then she turned red and trembled as she said, If anyone like that comes in here, I'll make sure they regret it. You 2 poor guys, let me get you something stronger, on the house. When Frank was able to speak, he asked many of the same questions I had wondered about. Why had this happened? Was he not good enough? I urged Frank to act normal until we figured things out. I offered to introduce him to my lawyer and private investigator and advised him to safeguard his finances, promising to help him with that, Dot. When I got home, Karen was asleep. I quietly checked the laundry basket and noticed something concerning. I slipped into bed without waking her and moved to my side. I quickly fell asleep, feeling drained. The next morning, I made breakfast. After Karen left for work, I took the kids to school. When I got back home, I checked my office for updates on Karen's conversation with Mary. It appeared they had spoken at length while I had been with Frank. Karen called Mary on the landline. Hi, how are you doing? Karen asked. Wasn't this afternoon amazing? I'm so sore I can hardly sit. I hope Frank doesn't have plans tonight. I don't think I'll be able to move in the morning. How did you find Clive? Mary responded. Absolutely. I could barely handle him. And he was quite different from anyone I've been with, Karen said. What about Paul? She asked. Paul's not as big as Clive, but he's skilled and it felt better, Karen replied. Are you thinking of leaving Mark for Paul? Maybe. The kids like Paul, and he even said he would buy them each a car if they were his. But I still care for Mark. He's a good husband and always puts me first. Then why are you seeing Paul if Mark is so great? I think it's the thrill of it all, but I might be falling for Paul and considering leaving Mark. What about Clive? Oh, no way. I don't want a serious relationship. This is just for fun. I usually see them for a few months and then move on. I've been having these flings since before I got married, but I'll never leave Frank. He takes care of me and loves the kids. When I'm ready to settle down, I'll stick with Frank and grow old with him. What if he finds out and leaves you? He won't. He has no idea. And if he does find out, I'll just cry and say it was a mistake. I'll tell him I only love him. He trusts me completely, so I'll be fine. If you've been seeing others for so long, how do you know the kids are even his? I'm not sure. Honestly, I doubt it sometimes, but I have no idea whose they could be. If he did leave me, I'd take what I could and keep seeing others. The trick is to keep him happy. Make sure to be intimate with him at least 3 times a week. I remember that. Mark didn't get any for 2 months, and when I saw him again, I made it up to him. Or rather, he made it up to me. I've never experienced anything like that. I had so many strong moments, I actually lost consciousness a couple of times. What was different this time? Well, He was really passionate this time. Instead of his usual sweet moments, he was very intense. He pushed me down and was rougher than usual. He did things he hadn't before. It was overwhelming, and even though I told him it hurt, he kept going until it overwhelmed me and I fainted. That doesn't sound like Mark. It seems like he was using you. That's what lovers do, not husbands. Be careful. He might suspect something. You might be right. He has been acting a little strange lately. I think I'll take a break from Paul for a bit. The next day, I went to check on Frank and see how he was doing. He owned a car dealership and had successfully expanded into limo rental and a workshop. I shared my conversation from yesterday with him, and I could see the pain on his face. Okay, so it's over between Mary and me. Do you think your lawyer can help me too? I called Anne and she asked me to send Frank over. I gave Frank her address and he left. There were still 6 weeks until the party and I had a lot to prepare. I had a plan for what I wanted to do to my wife, but I also needed to think about how to deal with Paul and Clive. My plan for Karen would be subtle but impactful. I needed to get back at 2 guys who had disrespected me. I wanted to show I could stand up for myself, but I didn't want to end up in jail. I heard Jill had a complicated past, so I decided to talk to her. Hi, Jill. Can we talk somewhere private? Sure, let's go out back. Listen, if what I say bothers you, just let me know. I've heard your ex was involved in some shady stuff. Is that true? Yeah, you could say that. Why do you ask? I was hoping you could connect me with someone who can help me create a little situation for 2 guys we both know. I can probably help with that. Let me make a call. Jill stepped outside to make the call. When she came back, she said someone would be here soon and offered me a drink while we waited. We sat in a booth enjoying a couple of beers. I looked at Jill. She was about 5'7" inches with a pretty face, long brown hair and a ponytail, and an overall nice appearance. It was easy to see why Frank liked her. Many men would. Have you decided if you like what you see? Sorry, Jill. You're very attractive. I just didn't notice it before because I was happily married and never looked at another woman like that. Don't worry. It's nice to know I still catch the attention of good-looking guys. Just don't stop noticing. But I want you to know I'm actually interested in Frank. Do you think I have a chance? I can tell you that Frank does fancy you, so go for it once everything is sorted out. Just then, a man dressed in a suit walked in and came straight to us. Jill introduced him as Ted, and we went to the back room. What can I help you with? Ted asked. I quickly explained what I wanted to happen to Clive and Paul. He assured me it could be handled, but he wanted to make sure Frank and I had a solid alibi. He also mentioned he needed payment in cash by a week before it happened, and it would cost me $100,000. It seemed worth it to me. I called Frank, who said he was on his way home after meeting with Anne, who had been very helpful. We met at his office to discuss how to keep his business safe from Mary and minimize his financial risks. After a couple of hours, we made some changes. We withdrew half of their savings, limited Mary's credit card, and set up an appointment to speak with a lawyer about placing his business in a trust for his kids, with him and the lawyer as trustees. He would work as a consultant with no regular pay. Frank plans to refinance his house to make the money disappear. I also let him know that I was going to start a complaint against Randall and Associates for not enforcing proper conduct in allowing our spouses to have inappropriate relationships during work hours. I suggested that we include Frank's wife in our plan because I had his approval. I shared my thoughts on how I wanted to handle the situation with Paul and Karen. Frank was eager to get back at them both. I had figured out how to teach Paul and Karen a lesson, and now it was time to focus on my kids. I didn't plan anything too harsh, just a little lesson on being responsible and taking care of themselves. It was just 2 weeks until our 20th anniversary, and I had a surprise ready for my children. As usual, I was preparing dinner when Karen came home, excited for her night out with the girls. The kids were busy with their homework, and Karen rushed upstairs without saying hello. I heard the shower running as I finished dinner and set the table. Eventually, Karen and the kids came back down, the kids looking a bit moody while Karen was clearly in a good mood. Looks like you're excited about something, I said. Just looking forward to hanging out with the girls, she replied. I turned to the kids. I've been thinking about how you can be more independent, and I have a surprise for you after dinner. After we ate, Karen started clearing the table, and the kids looked at me eagerly for the surprise. I made a quick phone call and then glanced out the window. About 15 minutes later, the surprise arrived. I signaled for my kids to follow me outside. Parked in front of our house were two brand new cars, a BMW for John and a Mercedes for Jasmine. As I handed them the keys, I said, "The taxes and insurance are taken care of, and they're full of gas. You can stay out until midnight since there's no school tomorrow. Go show your friends." As they drove off, I called out, "Drive safely." When I turned around, Karen stood in the doorway looking stunned. "It's nice to know I can still surprise you," I said before going back inside. Karen went upstairs to change for her night out. When she returned, she wore a striking red dress and high-heeled shoes. I remarked, "If I didn't know better, I'd think you're dressing up for a special occasion." She blushed, walked over, gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, and left. I went to my poker game and returned home around 10:30. Karen was already back and seemed upset. When I asked why she returned so early, she said, "A couple of the girls weren't feeling well, so we decided to end the night early." "You look a bit unwell too. Why not go to bed early?" I suggested. Karen went to bed, and I waited for the email and video I had been promised. Just 10 minutes later, they arrived. It seemed that whenever Mary and Karen met up with their partners, they used the same room at a motel, which made it easy for my private investigator to set up cameras inside. I turned on my computer and transferred the files from my phone. I received a brief email that simply said, "Job done." The video began as soon as they entered the room. Things escalated quickly, with both couples getting intimate and undressing. Karen and Paul were on the bed while Mary and Clive were engaged elsewhere. Then suddenly the door burst open. 4 large men wearing ski masks stormed into the room and threw Karen and Mary into the corner. Everyone froze, too shocked to react. One of the men, the apparent leader, started speaking, following a script I had written. "I don't know who you two are, and I'm not here to hurt you. Get dressed and sit on the couch until we're done. Afterward, you can leave, but remember, if anyone asks, you were never here. Understood?" Terrified, Karen and Mary nodded and quickly got dressed, sitting quietly on the couch. Meanwhile, Paul and Clive were restrained, their mouths taped shut. The leader continued his speech. "It looks like you two made a mistake messing with the wrong people's wives. Now it's time to pay for that." He opened a bag and took out 2 baseball bats and electric clippers. The men shaved Paul and Clive's heads, then blindfolded them. Another man of Asian descent entered the room carrying a bag of his own. He pulled out a tattoo pen, plugged it in, and prepared some ink. He tattooed degrading messages on both men's chests and abdomens before quietly packing up and leaving. After that, 2 of the masked men began using the bats, hitting Paul and Clive with precise, deliberate strikes. They aimed for their legs, breaking bones, and inflicted further damage. The men on the floor were soon unconscious, severely injured, and bleeding. The leader turned to Karen and Mary, who were huddled together on the couch. "You'll forget you ever saw this. Stay here for another 15 minutes before leaving. And remember, if you speak about this to anyone, you could be next." The next morning after breakfast, Karen mentioned she wasn't feeling well and went back to bed, clearly shaken by the events. I walked into my office and called Frank. I had sent him the recording the night before. "Hey man, that really helped. How about you?" he answered. "Yeah, I bet the girls are really scared." Karen went back to bed. "How's Mary doing?" "She came home looking terrible and went straight to the bathroom. Then she stayed in bed. I sold my boat yesterday and got a new one in the Grand Cayman Harbor. It's 60 feet long and perfect for sailing. I'm picking it up next Thursday before the party on Saturday. It'll take 2 people to sail it well. Are you interested?" "Are you serious? Really?" "Yeah, we don't have anything keeping us here anymore. Oh, and I talked to Jill about us. She feels the same way. Why don't you go and talk to her?" "Really? I hope you're not joking. I think I could really like her. I wonder if she enjoys sailing." "It's a boat with 2 double beds, so see if she has a friend." "Will do. See you later." After talking to Frank, I went to my computer and opened the call recording app to check if they talked about what happened last night. Karen called Mary on the landline. "Hi, Mary. Are you okay after last night?" "Not really. I was really scared. I thought something terrible might happen to us, and what happened to Clive and Paul. I hope they're all right. They must have been involved with others besides us. I hope we didn't catch anything. We should probably get checked. I didn't think about that. If we passed anything to our husbands, that would be a big problem. I thought Frank and Mark were behind it at first, but the guy said he didn't know who we were. The rest of the weekend went by without any problems. The kids came home Sunday night after dinner excited about their new cars. Karen still looked unwell when she went to work on Monday. That night after dinner and while the kids were out, I said the hard words, "Honey, we need to talk." The look on her face was unforgettable. "What is it? What's wrong?" She sat down, fidgeting and looking very uneasy. "Honey, you know my job dealing with stocks and shares? You win some, you lose some. Lately, I've been losing more than winning, so I need to tell you we're having some financial trouble. I've even had to sell our stocks and bonds to keep up with our bills. But don't worry, everything will be fine in the end." "Does this mean we have to cancel the party?" "No, sweetheart. It's just a small problem that I can manage. I thought you should know, though." "Thanks for keeping me updated. What about the kids' cars? How did you afford them?" "Oh, that's nothing. Just a few $1,000s. I'm talking about losing millions, and we're down to only a couple of million. I need that for my business. Should I be worried about our everyday expenses?" "Not at all. Just carry on as if nothing is wrong. But since I need to increase my investment, I have to take on some extra work, and I'll be meeting a client next week for a few days, starting Wednesday. You'll be back in time for the party, right?" "Yes, of course. Probably Saturday morning." That night, when we went to bed, Karen cuddled up to me. She reached out affectionately, and I thought, why not? We shared some intimate moments, and I felt a sense of closeness between us. Afterward, I went into my office to check on her phone. I found a conversation that caught my attention. Mary had called Karen. "Hi, Mary. Any updates?" "Yeah, I called the hospital pretending to be Clive's sister. It seems their injuries are serious but not life-threatening. Clive has multiple fractures in both legs and ankles. They're not sure if they can save his testicles. He'll be in the hospital for a while and may need a wheelchair for months, maybe longer. If Paul is in the same condition, will you still leave, Mark?" "No way! I don't want to be with someone who's not well for the rest of my life. I'll focus on Mark. At least he's stable. But I'm not sure how I'll manage without someone to turn to next week since Mark will be away." Frank is in the same situation. He needs to go to Vegas for a specialty car auction, so we're both in the same boat. Maybe we could go out together. I think I'll take it easy for a while and work on my marriage. I want to be the best wife I can be. I have to go now. Talk to you later. The next morning, I was up first and made breakfast. When everyone else came down, the kids rushed through their meals and hurried outside. Karen looked at me oddly. "What was that all about last night? I can hardly move this morning." "Did you not enjoy it? I thought you liked things a little wild." "I didn't say that. I was just surprised, that's all." On Tuesday, Anne, my lawyer, called to say we had a meeting with the attorneys at Randall & Associates about our case. We were set to meet on Wednesday at the Saturn Hotel. That night, I was with Karen again, and I didn't pay much attention to how she felt. I went straight to it without any lead-up and then went to clean up afterward. I didn't say anything. I just got back into bed, turned away, and tried to sleep. I thought I heard her crying as I drifted off, but I didn't let it bother me. Wednesday morning was like Tuesday, and while I was alone, I started to get ready to leave for good. I packed most of my things and put some items in my car for a storage facility. I took everything to the storage depot and planned to grab what I wanted when I finally left home for the last time. I met Anne half an hour before our appointment to share my thoughts on how to address my soon-to-be ex-wife. She listened carefully and thought my ideas could work. Then we went to meet the attorneys at Randall & Associates at the Saturn Hotel. When we arrived, we were shown into the conference room where we shook hands and sat down to talk terms. We were asking for $20 million as a class action for both me and Frank. They asked for proof, and we presented the video evidence from the motel. They responded that what their employees did in their own time was not their concern. Anne argued that since the room was paid for with a company credit card, it was company property during that time, and because their meeting went longer than their break, their employees were essentially being paid by the company. We were asked to wait outside while they discussed it. When we returned, their attorney said that while they didn't want to take responsibility, they were willing to make an offer if we signed a confidentiality agreement. Anne and I stood up to leave, and she said, "See you in court." As we were about to exit, Their attorneys stopped us, saying they would reconsider if we just waited a moment. They realized that if this went to court, the negative attention could cost them a lot. Their only option was to negotiate a settlement with a confidentiality agreement. Their first offer was $5 million, but we countered with $15 million, and they came back with $7 million. After Ann and I met outside, we decided to raise our demand to $12 million with no more talks. Take it or leave it. They said they needed to have a big meeting to approve our request. We replied that if they didn't agree now, the claim would increase to $30 million in court. After their lawyer called the chairman, they accepted our $12 million offer, and we shook hands. I then asked for a small change to the deal, and they agreed. Ann said she would prepare the papers by tomorrow afternoon. I asked that all 4 employees be let go the Monday after our anniversary. I got home before Karen and made dinner. It was a quiet meal while the kids went out to show off their cars. After dinner, Karen and I cleaned up and watched some TV. But when she cuddled up to me, I remembered her telling Mary that she would keep being unfaithful. This thought upset me, so I got up and went to my office saying I had work to do. When I finally went to bed, she was already asleep, so I tried not to wake her. Thursday morning was similar to Wednesday. I made breakfast and saw everyone off to work and school. I had a few errands to do, so I started drafting a contract I wanted to show Ann. Then, I loaded the last of my things to put in storage and took them there. Lastly, I arranged to end my contract with the car lease company. All 4 cars would be picked up as the party was in full swing. After lunch, I called Frank, who was at Jill's place. He invited me to come over. When I arrived, Frank and Jill were sitting in a booth, and Jill jumped up to give me a big hug. "Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much," she said. "What for? What have I done?" I asked. "For bringing Frank and me together. We seem perfect for each other," she replied. Frank then asked, "Mark, would it be okay if I booked another seat on our flight to the Caymans for Jill?" "That sounds great. Try to get seats next to each other," I said. That earned me another strong hug from Jill. I updated Frank on my plans and asked if he wanted to store anything in my unit. He had a couple of things, so I handed him the key. Just then, my phone rang. It was Ann, asking if I could bring Frank over to sign some documents. I said he was with me, so we headed to her office right away. We arrived at Ann's office 20 minutes later and quickly signed the papers. Frank returned to Jill's and I went home. At home, I checked my laptop to see if the girls had contacted me. Mary called Karen. "Hi, Mary. Do you know anything about Clive and Paul?" "No, nothing new. They are still in intensive care." "How's it going with Mark?" "I'm not sure. He's been acting distant. I tried to get close to him, but he just ignored me. I've been feeling really frustrated." "Yeah, I get it. Frank's been spending all his time at Jill's place. I'm starting to think something's going on between them." "Well, you can't really complain, given what you've been up to for years." "I know, but it still makes me mad. Now you know how he'd feel if he found out about you and all those other guys." "You're right, but it still feels like betrayal. What are you going to do for some relief?" "You're one to talk. Anyway, if Mark won't help me out tonight, I'll just use my little secret stash. Talk to you later. Bye." I found this conversation quite revealing. Curious, I decided to look for her little secret. After some searching, I found a box at the back of her closet with a few things. I checked to make sure everything was working, and then put it back where I found it, smiling to myself. That evening, Karen came home, and since the kids were staying over with friends, we had dinner alone. We ordered our favorite Chinese takeout and shared a bottle of wine while watching TV. Karen snuggled up close to me, and I knew she was hoping for more. I decided to play along, so I opened another bottle of wine. "Are you trying to get me tipsy so you can have your way with me?" she teased. "Do I need to? You are my wife, after all," I replied, playing along. She laughed. "You're being a naughty boy. Maybe I should punish you." "In your dreams. If anyone's getting punished, it's you for being distant this past year." She looked a little uneasy. "What do you mean by that?" "I think you know exactly what I mean. Coming home late, neglecting me. We haven't been close in over 2 months. You owe me for that." She seemed relieved at my playful tone. After finishing the second bottle of wine, she was more relaxed. I playfully pulled her onto my lap, lifted her skirt, and gave her a few light slaps. She reacted with surprise, but not displeasure. I gave her a few more, and soon her cheeks were flushed. I leaned in and whispered, "Do you want me to continue?" In a soft voice, she answered, "Yes, please." I hadn't expected this, but she seemed to be enjoying it. Encouraged, I teased her a bit more. "Ask nicely, and I might even reward you later." She responded with a playful grin, and I gave her a few more light taps, enough to make her breath quicken. Soon after, she seemed to drift off, exhausted and content. The rest of the night passed quietly. I realized that beneath everything, there were still moments where we could connect. I gently lifted her and carried her upstairs to the bed. Once there, I helped her out of her clothes and quickly got undressed myself. We shared a moment of closeness, and she responded warmly. After a while, we fell into a rhythm, and I could see how much she was enjoying it. Later, I brought out some extra items we sometimes use to enhance the experience, making sure she was comfortable with everything. Her reactions told me she was fully into the moment, and we both shared in the intensity of it. As the night went on, she seemed to drift off, exhausted but content. Afterward, I covered her up and went for a shower. When I returned, she was already asleep, so I quietly crawled into bed beside her, feeling at ease. We both fell asleep quickly. The next morning, things were mostly back to normal, except Karen kept giving me amused glances. Eventually, I asked her what was going on. "Well, if you must know, I can barely sit down," she said with a laugh. I chuckled. "You didn't seem to mind at the time. I remember someone asking for more, wasn't that you?" She smirked. "Yeah, but seriously, whatever you used last night, it made sitting down a challenge today. My legs and hips are sore." "So are you saying it wasn't worth the fun we had?" "No, it was amazing. Just maybe not on a weeknight when I have work the next day." "Good to know, because tonight isn't a weeknight and I was thinking about round 2. "Not a chance," she replied with a playful smile. "I'm too sore. Maybe next week. You'll just have to settle for something simpler in the meantime." I grinned. "Well, I'm going away for a few days next week, so I hope you'll be up for something by then. We'll see how I feel on Tuesday, but no promises." With that, she left for work, and I couldn't help but smile to myself. Later that morning, I received a call from Anne, asking if I could come by her place. When I arrived, she told me she had received a check for $12 million and wanted to know how I wanted it divided. After thinking it over, I decided to do the following. Anne would get her fee of $600,000, I would take $4 million to plan a surprise for my family, and Frank would receive the rest. I didn't need all the money, but Frank wasn't doing as well as I was, so I let him take the larger amount. The money for Frank was to go into his Cayman account, and mine would go into a special trust. Anne agreed and started the transfers. Frank was now richer than he had ever been, and I couldn't wait to see his reaction. I spent the rest of the day working until it was time for the kids to come home. They rushed through the door, each giving me a hug. It was a nice change. After their hugs, they ran to their rooms. Karen came home at her usual time and went to shower. By the time she came down, dinner was ready. The kids were excited, saying how their new cars made them the envy of their classmates. Later, after dinner, the kids went out with their friends and Karen and I settled down to watch TV. I found myself wondering if Karen or Mary had found new partners since their last relationships ended. They might be in for a surprise. When we went to bed, Karen kept her promise and was very affectionate. The weekend went smoothly and I enjoyed some quality time with her. I looked forward to Tuesday night. I decided to check for any recorded phone calls. When I opened the app, I found only one recording between cell phones. It was a call from Karen to Mary. "Hi, what's up? Have you heard anything more about Paul and Clive?" "Yes, my neighbor's sister works in the ICU and she said they probably will never walk again without help. They also need surgery for some other serious injuries." "How's it going with Mark?" "He's been very passionate lately. I had a great night with him and it was more than I ever expected. If he keeps this up, I might not need to look elsewhere for happiness." "That sounds great, but Frank hasn't wanted to be close for 2 weeks. When I try to be intimate, he just seems tired or distracted. It's so frustrating. Even my usual methods aren't working. I need to find some way to feel better." "That's tough. Just give it a little time. I'm sure things will get better soon. Maybe after a few months we can talk about trying something different together to add some fun." "That sounds interesting. I think he might enjoy that after a while. Who knows? Maybe we could even think about bringing in another partner down the line." "I'm not sure he would like that. He's not one to share easily." I had to go, but I would talk to you soon. I sent the conversation to Frank, thinking he might find it funny to know how upset his wife was. About half an hour later, he called me back. Sorry it took me a while to get back to you. Jill and I couldn't stop laughing. What's your plan? Are you having second thoughts? No way. I can't wait for Saturday. What about you? I can't get away from here fast enough. Oh, about Wednesday. If you get a taxi to my garage, one of my drivers can take us to the airport. Is that okay? That sounds great. See you and Jill on Wednesday. When I woke up on Monday morning, Karen wasn't in bed, but I could smell bacon cooking. I took a shower and went downstairs just in time to see the kids leaving for school. They waved goodbye as they left. Karen served breakfast and placed a plate of bacon, eggs, and hash browns in front of me. What's the special occasion? Did I miss a birthday or something? No, honey, I realized I haven't cooked for you in a long time and I wanted to show you how much I care. She leaned over and gave me a quick kiss. Aren't you eating? I asked. I don't have time. See you later. And just like that, she left for work. If only she had been this way instead of everything else, we might have been happy. But it's done now, Dot. That night when we went to bed, she asked if we could be close like we used to, saying she felt a bit uncomfortable. I took my time with her, making it sweet and gentle as I once did. She seemed really happy and we fell asleep together. Dot on Tuesday morning while I was making breakfast. She came downstairs just after the kids had left. Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, Dad, they called out as they went. Karen looked at me with a soft gaze, just like when we were first married. Honey, last night was amazing. Please promise me we can be close like that at least once a week. But I thought you liked it more intense. You seemed to enjoy it when I was a bit rough. I don't want you to think about someone else because I'm too gentle. Oh, that will never happen. I love you too much. That night we were close again, and I helped her shower afterward because she was so tired. She fell asleep quickly. Looking at her, I wished she had been faithful. I really cared for her and still did deep down. On Wednesday, I made breakfast as usual and watched the kids leave for school for what felt like the last time, waiting for Karen to head to work. She kissed me softly and said, "Take care on your trip and remember to be good. Love you." Goodbye, Karen. And just like that, she was gone. She didn't even notice that I hadn't said I love you back. I called a taxi to take me to Frank's garage and his driver took us to the airport. We found 3 seats together, with Jill by the window and me by the aisle. Jill fell asleep, which was convenient because I didn't want her to hear what I had to say. I told Frank to check his Cayman bank account for a nice surprise. Wow, Mark, where did all this money come from? He asked, surprised. It's your share of the settlement from Randall Associates. You should be able to live comfortably on that for a while. I wanted to talk to you about investing it. Will you help me? Of course, that's what friends are for. We landed at Grand Cayman and took a cab to the marina, where my new boat, a 60-foot catamaran named Susie Cute, awaited us. As we boarded her, I could see she was amazing, fully equipped with all the latest comforts. Even Jill, who had never been sailing before, was excited. We dropped off our bags and went shopping for supplies for the next few weeks. I called Karen to let her know I arrived safely and mentioned that I was tired and would go to bed early. That night, we slept on the boat, like kids wanting to camp out in the backyard. The next day, we checked into a nice hotel that overlooked the marina. We took Susie Cute out to get used to how she sailed. Thankfully, Jill picked it up quickly and was eager to learn everything. On Friday, we tied up at a small marina on one of the islands to explore. I called Karen to say everything was fine, but I wouldn't be home until late in the evening and encouraged her to go to the party without me. I would meet her there. We chatted for a bit before saying goodbye. Frank also called Mary to tell her he was staying longer to see a special car auction and would meet her at the party. On Saturday, we sailed back to our usual spot and docked. After lunch, we prepared the boat and our camera gear for the evening's fun. We ate dinner early and finalized our plans for the night, keeping our drinks to a minimum so we could stay sharp. On Wednesday, I woke up to the smell of bacon cooking and thought about the previous night. Mark had been very attentive, and I had a good night's rest afterward, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. I found myself wondering why I had started seeing someone else when Mark was clearly a much better partner. I don't want to make excuses. I know I made mistakes. But deep down, I realized that I wouldn't have crossed that line without Mary pushing me. I finally gave in to Paul, partly to keep Mary quiet, but also because there was a thrill in sneaking around. After that first time, I couldn't stop. Then I made the mistake of thinking I loved Paul. I didn't see the truth until some guys hurt him badly. After that, I understood that I wasn't as upset as I should have been if I really loved him. I felt so confused. Then Mark began showing me real affection again, gentle and sweet, like when we first got together. He also noticed my wild side and treated me in ways I had come to accept, but I didn't want it to end. I realized I still loved Mark and wanted only him. I knew I could never tell him about my time with Paul. He would leave me. So I promised myself that I would never cheat again and would be the partner he truly deserves. Karen, S phone rang. Hi, Mary, what's up? Hi, Cass. Frank's gone until Friday, and I know Mark won't be home until then, so I've arranged for us to meet a couple of guys at the Moonlight Bar at 7 p.m. Let's have some fun. No thanks, Mary. I've realized how much I love Mark, and I want to start fresh. No more cheating for me. I want to be a good partner every day. I almost lost a wonderful husband and father. I know it was you who got me started down that path. Ultimately, it's my responsibility. I could have said no, but I got caught up in the excitement. Now, the only person I want to be with is Mark, so you'll have to go by yourself. Okay, Cass, your choice. But you might come back once the thrill fades. Are we still on for Saturday? Of course, I don't want to end our friendship. I just can't be your partner in this anymore. We'll see about that. Bye for now. Karen missed Mark a lot during the week and could hardly wait for Saturday. Most of Saturday was spent getting ready for the evening's gathering. Saturday, 7:30 p.m. Karen stood at the door welcoming the guests as they arrived, around 70 in total. She felt a bit uneasy since she hadn't heard from Mark since yesterday when he said he'd be late. She had tried calling him a few times but hadn't reached him. Frank hadn't arrived either, but Mary didn't seem worried. She just said he would get here eventually and talked about her fun night with the two men she was supposed to meet. 8:30. Karen started to feel a bit anxious since both Mark and Frank had not shown up yet, and dinner was nearly over. Mark had arranged for the DJ to connect him to the party once the meal was finished. His laptop buzzed, letting him know someone wanted to connect on a video call. He accepted it and saw that dinner had just ended and the tables were being cleared. He glanced at the camera, which showed him on a split screen in the dining room. "Good evening, everyone," he said, and people turned to see where the voice was coming from. They saw Mark's smiling face on the screen. "Thank you all for coming." Karen and Mary walked over to the screen, and Mark waved at them, and they waved back. "This should have been a celebration of 20 years of marriage, but my wife decided to end our marriage by being unfaithful," he continued. On the right side of the screen, a video began to play. Karen covered her mouth with her hand as the guests gasped and murmured unkind words. Mary knelt beside her friend for support. Mark went on. "This has been happening for at least 6 months, maybe longer. Mary, who was sitting next to her, has encouraged this behavior. They made a good group." The video showed the 4 friends swapping partners. Some guests looked away in disgust, and a few women were so upset that they had to leave the room. The men, however, seemed to be enjoying the scene, grinning widely. As the video continued, Frank suddenly appeared in front of the camera and waved at Mary. "Hello there. I'm glad you're not here. Say hello to your replacement." A woman named Jill stepped into the view and waved. "Thank you for giving him up. I'll take much better care of him," she said. Mark took back the conversation. "And to my children, I want to say, I watched you welcome my replacement." The screen showed John and Jasmine running to Jill, and more gasps filled the room. "Well, that didn't turn out so well, did it? So your punishment is that you will need to work to fund your college education. For every dollar you save for college, I will match it. I have set up a trust for your future education, but only if you graduate. If not, it will go to charity. The choice is yours. Oh, and the cars you love will be taken back by the lease company on Monday, including mine and your mother's. So you'll need to get used to taking the bus. Now you know what it feels like when someone you trusted betrays you. I hope this is a lesson for you. As for you, my unfaithful wife, I have emptied our bank and savings account. You stopped adding money 6 months ago, but since you and Mary will be losing your jobs for not keeping your promises on Monday, I have left $30,000 in your account. I have also arranged for you to live in the house, which is now owned by a trust I set up. You must not date or have anyone over until the children finish their education. After that, you'll need to find your own place. To help you, I will give you a monthly allowance of $2,500. This will stop if you leave home or start seeing someone else. I will check in on you once a week without telling you when to see if you follow these rules. You may think this is unfair, but it's not worse than discovering that the person you wanted to spend your life with wasn't honest. I hope you have a hard time and go away along with our children. Frank has made similar plans for Mary, but his kids will be well cared for. My lawyer will visit you on Monday evening to discuss the details of our divorce. Both Karen and Mary were on the floor crying, but no one seemed to pay attention. Soon the hall was empty except for the two women who eventually had to be taken away by ambulance. 5 years later, Frank and Jill left Mark and opened a bar on a Greek island. Mark often stayed with them to help Frank manage his money. He also met Terry, an English woman 5 years younger than him, who now helps with his boat. Karen has not yet started to date because the children are still in college. Mark softened a bit, and as long as Karen stays single and doesn't have guests in the house, she can live there for now. Mary struggled to keep her life together and was asked to leave her home within a month of the divorce. She now lives in a rundown apartment in a tough neighborhood, feeling unloved, especially by her children who haven't spoken to her since that night. She works as a secretary in a travel agency, and she only got the job because the manager noticed her from a video that went viral, and he now treats her poorly at work. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe to Infidelity Plus to stay updated with more captivating tales of infidelity and payback. Turn on notifications so you're the first to see our latest content.